couple went for a hike in Red Rock Canyon to enjoy one last adventure before their baby arrived. But they never returned, vanishing without a trace in the Nevada desert. Then, 4 years later, a jogger and his dog make a gruesome discovery beneath a rocky overhang, disturbing evidence that shatters everything investigators believed about their disappearance. The Nevada sun blazed overhead as Danielle Caldwell squinted against the harsh light, reflecting off the red sandstone formations. At 29, she'd grown accustomed to these weekend searches. Her hiking boots crunched against the loose gravel as she paused to take a swig from her water bottle, the lukewarm liquid doing little to combat the dry heat that seemed to suck moisture from every pore. "Danny, we should probably think about heading back," called out Marcus, one of the regular volunteers who'd been joining these searches for the past 2 years. His face was flushed red beneath his baseball cap, sweat staining the collar of his shirt. Danielle looked around at the small group. 7 people total today, down from the 15 who used to show up regularly when the case was still fresh. 4 years had a way of wearing down hope, transforming it into something else entirely. What had started as desperate searches for survivors had long since become grim expeditions looking for closure. "Yeah, you're right," she replied. Daniela's sister, Marissa, had been 7.5 months pregnant when she disappeared with Ethan, her husband, 4 years ago. Danielle pulled out her GPS device to mark their search area. They'd developed a systematic approach over the years, methodically covering different sections of Red Rock Canyon. The police had long since relegated the case to their cold files, only responding to specific tips or leads. But Danielle couldn't let go. Marissa was her only remaining family. Their parents had died in a car accident 6 years ago. "All right, everyone," Danielle called out, her voice carrying across the rocky terrain. "Let's pack it up for today. Make sure you've got all your gear." When they finally reached the parking lot, everyone dispersed to their respective vehicles. Danielle popped her trunk, tossing in her backpack and search equipment. The digital clock on her phone read 11 a.m. as she pulled it from her pocket, finally getting signal bars after hours in the communication dead zone of the deeper canyon. Her screen lit up with notifications, missed calls, text messages, voicemails. Her heart rate spiked when she saw they were all from the same source. Detective Raymond Chen from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. They hit the callback button. The phone rang once before Detective Chen's familiar baritone filled her ear. "Danielle? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for the past 2 hours." "I'm sorry, Detective. I was out in Red Rock with my search group. No signal. What's happened? Is everything okay?" "Are you still at Red Rock Canyon?" "Yes, we just got back to the parking area near the visitor center. Detective, what's going on?" There was a pause, and Danielle could hear muffled voices in the background. "We've had a development in your sister's case. A hiker found something this morning that we believe belongs to Marissa." The water bottle slipped from Danielle's other hand, splashing across the hot asphalt. Sarah and Marcus, who had been loading their own vehicle nearby, noticed her distress and hurried over. "What kind of evidence?" Danielle managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Can you drive to the White Rock Hills Loop area? It's on the north side of the canyon. I'll send you the exact coordinates." "Of course. Yes. I'll leave right now." "Good. I'll text you the location. There will be multiple patrol cars at the site. You can't miss us." After ending the call, Danielle looked up at the concerned faces surrounding her. "They found something," she said, her voice shaking. "The detective wants us to meet him at White Rock Hills Loop." Without hesitation, Sarah placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We're coming with you." Her phone buzzed with the coordinates from Detective Chen. She plugged them into her GPS, noting the location was about 45 minutes away. 3 other volunteers, Tom, Janet, and Phil, agreed to join them, forming a small convoy as they left the parking lot. The landscape shifted as they drove, the iconic red rocks giving way to paler limestone formations. White Rock Hills Loop was a less popular area of the park system, known for its challenging terrain and remote location. As they approached the coordinates, Danielle spotted the cluster of police vehicles. She pulled into the makeshift parking area, her hands trembling as she shifted into park. She exited the car, and Detective Chen led her and her friends to his unmarked cruiser. "The site is about a mile from here. The terrain's too rough for regular vehicles past this point." They piled into 2 police SUVs, the vehicles specially equipped for desert navigation. The ride was bumpy and uncomfortable, following what could barely be called a trail. When they finally stopped, she could see a cluster of people ahead: crime scene technicians, uniformed officers, and what looked like search and rescue personnel. A temporary canopy had been erected to provide shade for an evidence collection area. As they hiked the remaining distance, Detective Chen fell into step beside her. "I want to prepare you for what we've found. It's not good news, Danielle." She nodded, unable to speak. Her legs felt leaden, each step requiring conscious effort. They approached the canopy where a man stood near a German shepherd. Detective Chen made introductions. "Danielle, this is Malcolm Brandt. He made the discovery this morning." Malcolm was a man in his mid-40s with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes. He removed his baseball cap respectfully. "I'm so sorry for what you're going through," he said quietly. "I was hiking with Bella here," he indicated the dog. "Trying a new trail I'd never explored before. More challenging than my usual routes." Bella ran ahead and came back with something in her mouth. Danielle's gaze dropped to the evidence table, where various items were laid out, tagged and photographed. Her breath caught when she saw them. Bones, unmistakably human, pale and weathered by exposure. "It was a radius bone," Malcolm continued gently. "From a forearm. I recognized it because I used to be a paramedic. Once I realized what Bella had found, I marked the spot and called 911 immediately." Detective Chen guided Danielle closer to the evidence table. "After Mr. Brandt's call, we sent our forensic team out immediately. There was a severe windstorm last night, probably the worst we've had all year. We believe it scattered remains that had been protected until now." Danielle forced herself to look at the collection of bones, her vision blurring with tears. But it was the next piece of evidence that made her knees buckle. "This is how we suspected it might be your sister," Detective Chen said, pointing to a larger bone, a tibia with surgical hardware still attached. "You mentioned in your initial report that Marissa had knee surgery?" "Yes," Danielle whispered. 3 years before she disappeared. A skiing accident. She had pins and a plate put in. "The serial numbers on the hardware match her medical records," the detective confirmed. "We're still waiting for DNA confirmation, but it's her." The words came out as a broken sob. "Oh, God, it's really her." Sarah wrapped an arm around Danielle's shoulders, supporting her weight as her legs threatened to give out completely. But Detective Chen wasn't finished. His expression grew even more somber. "Danielle, there's more. We found additional remains. Smaller bones, found in a crevice in the cliff face." The implication hit her like a physical blow. The baby, Marissa's baby. "The forensic anthropologist believes they're consistent with a late-term fetus," Detective Chen continued, his professional demeanor barely masking his own discomfort. "Some bones show evidence of scavenger activity. Coyotes are common in this area." Danielle couldn't hold back the sobs anymore. 4 years of hoping, of imagining scenarios where Marissa and Ethan had somehow survived, were just lost or hurt but alive somewhere. It all crumbled in the face of these weathered bones laid out on a folding table. "What about Ethan?" she managed to ask between gulps of air. "Did you find?" "No," Detective Chen replied. "We've found no remains that we can definitively identify as male. The search team is still working, expanding the grid, but so far, nothing." "How can that be?" "They were together. They posted that photo on Facebook from the canyon that morning. The detective's expression was carefully neutral. That's one of many questions we need to answer. Without evidence of Mr. Voss's remains or any sign of other parties involved, we have to consider all possibilities. You think Ethan did this? Danielle's voice rose in disbelief. That's insane. He loved her. They tried for 6 years to have a baby. He was a surgeon. He saved lives. He would never... I understand this is difficult to process, Detective Chen said calmly. But in cases like this, we have to examine every angle. The fact that only your sister's remains have been found, that they were concealed rather than simply lost. These are factors we can't ignore. Danielle shook her head vehemently. Ethan wasn't even an experienced hiker. Neither of them were. That's why I told them not to go, especially with Marissa so far along in her pregnancy. They told me they were just doing a light hike. The idea that he could have navigated this far into the desert, done something to her, hidden the bodies? It doesn't make sense. People can surprise us, even those we think we know well, the detective replied gently. But you're right that there are many questions. That's why we need to re-examine everything. He gestured toward the cliff face where crime scene tape marked off an area. The remains were found beneath that overhang, partially protected by fallen rocks. It's possible they've been there the entire time, preserved by the shelter until last night's storm dislodged them. So what happens now? Danielle asked, exhausted by the emotional toll of the past hour. We'll transport everything to the coroner's office for full analysis and DNA testing. We'll need a sample from you for comparison since you're Marissa's biological sister. The investigation will be reopened as active. Danielle nodded numbly. She walked over to where Malcolm Brandt stood with his dog, needing to thank the man who had finally given her answers, even if they weren't the ones she'd hoped for. Mr. Brandt, thank you for calling it in, for doing the right thing. Malcolm's eyes were sympathetic. I'm just sorry it had to be such difficult news. Bella and I hike out here several times a week, but this was our first time in this particular area. I guess it was meant to be. Would it be okay if I contacted you later? To thank you properly? My sister would have wanted. Her voice broke again. Of course, the detective has my information. Take all the time you need. Detective Chen approached again. Danielle, we should head back. The forensic team will be here for several more hours, but there's nothing more you need to see. We'll need you to come to the station for the DNA sample and to review the case files. The journey back to the parking area passed in a blur. When they arrived, the media presence had only grown, but Danielle felt too drained to care about their shouted questions or clicking cameras. You can follow us to the station, Detective Chen said. Or if you'd prefer, I can have an officer drive your car and you can ride with me. Danielle looked at her trembling hands, then at the keys she clutched. I don't think I should drive right now. That's perfectly understandable. He motioned to a young officer. Officer Martinez will take care of your vehicle. As she handed over her keys and slid into the detective's car, Danielle caught a final glimpse of the desert landscape that had swallowed her sister 4 years ago and had only now begun to give up its secrets. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department building loomed before them, its modern glass and concrete facade reflecting the harsh afternoon sun. Detective Chen escorted Danielle through the main entrance, past the security checkpoint, and into the bustling interior where officers and civilians moved with practiced efficiency. They entered a small medical examination room where a forensic technician waited with a collection kit. The woman, whose badge identified her as Teresa Hoffman, offered a sympathetic smile. This will just take a moment, Ms. Caldwell. I need you to open your mouth and I'll swab the inside of your cheek. Danielle complied, feeling the cotton swab brush against her inner cheek. That's all we need, Teresa said. The lab will run the comparison as priority. We should have results within 48 to 72 hours. Detective Chen thanked the technician and led Danielle up 2 floors to the Criminal Investigations Division. His office was modest but organized, with case files neatly arranged on shelves and a large whiteboard covered in notes from various investigations. He pulled out a thick manila folder. Danielle recognized her sister's name on the tab. "I've reviewed the original case file, but I'd like to go through everything again with you. Sometimes details that seemed unimportant at the time can take on new significance." "Tell me about that Sunday again. October 14th, 2018. Walk me through everything you remember." She took a deep breath, casting her mind back to that morning 4 years ago. "Marissa called me around 8 a.m. She was excited, said Ethan had the day off and they wanted to go for a hike. I immediately told her no. She was 36 weeks pregnant, Detective, just 4 weeks from her due date." "And she'd had that knee surgery previously?" "Yes, about 3 years before she disappeared. She'd recovered well, but it still bothered her sometimes, especially with the extra weight from the pregnancy. I told her it was a terrible idea." Detective Chen made notes as she spoke. "But they went anyway?" "Marissa could be stubborn. She said her obstetrician, Dr. Patricia Morse, had told her to stay active, that walking would help with the 3rd trimester symptoms, the swelling, the back pain. She said it would help position the baby properly for delivery." Danielle's voice caught slightly. "I suggested she walk around the neighborhood, maybe go to the mall where it was air-conditioned. But Ethan had been working long hours, and they wanted to do something together before the baby came." For the next 2 hours, Detective Chen methodically walked her through every aspect of the case. He asked about Ethan's family, parents deceased, one brother who lived in Ohio, Marissa's friends, a small circle, mostly other young mothers or expecting mothers, their finances, comfortable but not wealthy, and any changes in behavior leading up to the disappearance. Detective Chen's expression was sympathetic but professional. "I know this is difficult to consider, but the fact remains that we found your sister's remains concealed in a remote location with no trace of her husband. In cases like this, we have to consider that the missing person might be responsible." But why? What possible motive could he have? They were happy. They were about to have the baby they'd wanted for so long. Sometimes people hide things from those closest to them. Financial troubles, addiction issues, an affair. We'll be looking into all of it. "You won't find anything," Danielle said firmly, "because there's nothing to find." Detective Chen closed the file. "I hope you're right. In the meantime, I need you to be careful. This discovery is already on the news. In our experience, when cold cases heat up like this, it can trigger unexpected reactions. If Ethan is alive somewhere, he might try to make contact, or if someone else was involved, they might feel threatened by the renewed investigation." "You think I could be in danger?" "I think it's wise to be cautious. If anything unusual happens, strange phone calls, someone following you, anything that seems off, I want you to call me immediately." "The excavation team, did they find anything else?" Detective Chen shook his head. "They've expanded the search grid, but no additional remains so far. They'll continue tomorrow, weather permitting. We're also bringing in cadaver dogs to cover more ground." Danielle stood, her body feeling heavy with exhaustion, both physical and emotional. They walked together back to the main corridor. As they passed the elevators, a young officer approached with a set of car keys. "Ms. Caldwell, Officer Martinez asked me to return these to you." "Thank you," Danielle said, taking her keys. The familiar turn into her driveway had never felt so final. Danielle pulled into her garage, the automatic door closing behind her like a seal on the day's revelations. Inside, her house felt impossibly quiet. She dropped her keys on the entry table and stumbled to the living room, collapsing onto the sofa as the weight of everything crashed down upon her. The tears came then, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Her gaze fell on the collection of family photos arranged on the built-in shelves. Now she was the only one left, The photo blurred as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Her parents, killed by a drunk driver on their way home from their 35th anniversary dinner. And now, Marissa and her unborn child, their bones scattered in the desert like discarded refuse. Unable to bear the silence any longer, she made her way to her bedroom, suddenly exhausted, but knowing sleep would be elusive. On impulse, she opened her laptop and navigated to Facebook. She rarely used the platform, but curiosity about the man who'd found her sister drove her to search for Malcolm Brandt. His profile was public, filled with exactly what she'd expect from an avid hiker. Photo after photo showed him on various trails throughout Nevada and neighboring states, always with Bella by his side. One post from 3 weeks ago caught her attention. Malcolm stood outside a small cafe called Desert Blooms, holding what appeared to be a slice of lavender honey cake. His caption read, "Best cake I've had in ages." This little place near Valley of Fire is a hidden gem. The mention of cake triggered a flood of memories. Marissa had been extraordinarily talented with pastries. Even after leaving her position at the Wynn to focus on her pregnancy, she'd continued baking. Their house had always smelled of vanilla and butter, fresh bread, and delicate sweets. Staring at Malcolm's post, Danielle thought about how she wanted to thank him. A store-bought gift felt inadequate for the man who'd finally given her answers. Sitting in her quiet bedroom, Danielle made a decision. She would honor Malcolm and her sister by keeping that dream alive. But first, she needed Marissa's recipe book to bake something for Malcolm. The handwritten notebook contained all of Marissa's treasured recipes. Danielle knew it was at Marissa and Ethan's house. She glanced at the window, noting there was still some daylight left. The thought of waiting until tomorrow felt unbearable. If she got the recipes tonight, she could start baking first thing in the morning. The walk to Marissa's house had always been pleasant. Just 10 minutes through the quiet residential neighborhood they'd chosen specifically so they could be close to each other. But now, as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, each familiar landmark felt like a small grief. The house itself sat quietly on its corner lot, looking exactly as it had 4 years ago, except for the overgrown lawn and the pile of yellowed newspapers on the porch. Danielle had maintained the property taxes and utilities for the first year, hoping against hope. Eventually, financial reality had forced her to let most services lapse, keeping only the basics to prevent the city from condemning the property. She used her key to unlock the front door. The familiar scent of her sister's vanilla perfume had long since faded, replaced by the musty smell of a house too long closed up. She climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, each step echoing in the empty house. The recipe book would be in Marissa's secret spot, she was certain. Her sister had been protective of her recipes, treating them like the valuable intellectual property they were. The bedroom felt especially hollow. The bed still bore the impression of where someone had sat, probably a detective going through the nightstand drawers. Danielle searched the obvious places first: the bookshelf, the dresser, the closet shelves. Nothing. Then she remembered. The hidden cabinet. Marissa had shown it to her once, delighted by the cleverness of it. What looked like a simple decorative mirror above the bed actually swung open to reveal a shallow cabinet behind. Danielle reached up and pressed the hidden latch. The mirror swung open, and there it was, a leather-bound notebook with Marissa's recipes embossed on the cover in gold script. She pulled it out carefully, sitting on the dusty sofa to flip through its pages. Her sister's precise handwriting filled every page. Each recipe was a small piece of Marissa's soul preserved in ink. A sound from outside made her freeze. A car engine idling. Not unusual in a residential neighborhood, but something about its persistence made her uneasy. She moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. A dark sedan sat at the curb. 3 men emerged, and Danielle's blood ran cold as they approached the house with purposeful strides. The one in front wore a distinctive hat, a brown fedora that seemed oddly familiar. Her mind raced. Should she call out, ask what they wanted? But something in their body language warned her against it. These weren't casual visitors or concerned neighbors. She heard them at the front door, not knocking, but working at the lock. The metallic scratching sound sent adrenaline flooding through her system. She needed to call for help, but she'd stupidly left her phone at home, thinking she'd only be gone minutes. Racing downstairs as quietly as possible, she headed for the kitchen landline. In her haste, her hip caught a decorative vase on the hall table. It toppled, shattering on the hardwood floor with a crash that seemed deafening in the quiet house. The scratching at the lock stopped immediately. Through the curtained front window, she saw the three men backing away, returning quickly to their car. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to get a better look at their faces without being seen. The man in the hat turned slightly as he reached the car, and Danielle gasped. In profile, with the way he carried himself, the slope of his shoulders, he looked like Ethan. But that was impossible, wasn't it? The car pulled away, and Danielle stood frozen for a long moment before remembering the broken vase. She found a broom and dustpan in the kitchen, carefully sweeping up every shard of porcelain. The mundane task helped calm her racing heart. Who were those men? If one of them really was Ethan, why didn't he have a key to his own house? Why try to break in? And who were the others with him? She reached for the kitchen phone, but the line was dead. Of course, she hadn't paid those bills in years. Detective Chen's warnings echoed in her mind about strange activities following the discovery of evidence. She needed to tell him about this, but first she had to get home safely. She climbed back upstairs to retrieve the recipe book. As she reached for it, her eyes fell on a framed photo on the shelf. Ethan at a medical conference in Reno, wearing the exact same brown fedora the man outside had worn. He'd bought it on a whim, she remembered, said it made him feel like Indiana Jones. A chill ran down her spine. She grabbed both the photo and the recipe book, then did a quick check from all the windows. The street appeared empty, the mysterious car nowhere in sight. Still, she felt exposed and vulnerable as she locked the house and began the walk home, clutching the recipe book and photo close to her chest. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every car engine made her heart race. The 10-minute walk felt like an hour. Only when she was safely inside her own home with the door locked and deadbolted did she allow herself to breathe properly again. The moment Danielle's front door clicked shut behind her, she rushed to her phone, hands trembling as she dialed Detective Chen's direct number. He answered on the second ring. "Detective, something just happened at Marissa's house," she said without preamble, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I think 3 men tried to break in. I was inside getting something, and I heard them working on the lock. When I knocked over a vase, they ran." "Are you safe now? Are you at home?" "Yes, I'm home. Doors locked. But detective, I think one of them might have been Ethan. He was wearing this distinctive brown fedora that Ethan owned." There was a pause on the line. "You think? Did you get a clear look at his face?" "No," Danielle admitted, frustration coloring her voice. "Just a glimpse of his profile as he got back in the car. But the hat, the way he moved. And if it was Ethan, why didn't he have a key? Why break in?" "What kind of vehicle were they driving?" "A dark sedan. Black or dark blue. I couldn't tell in the twilight. I didn't get the license plate." Detective Chen sighed. "I'll send a patrol unit to check the area and canvass the neighbors. That's about all we can do with such limited information." "Can't you station someone at the house? What if they come back?" "I understand your concern, but I can't justify posting an officer there indefinitely based on an attempted break-in by unidentified subjects. We don't have the resources for that." Danielle gripped the phone tighter. "But you said yourself that the discovery might trigger something." "I did, and I stand by that warning. We'll increase patrols in the area and alert the neighbors to be vigilant. If they see anything suspicious, they'll call it in." After extracting a promise that she'd call immediately if anything else happened, Detective Chen ended the call. Danielle set the phone down and slumped against her kitchen counter, adrenaline slowly giving way to exhaustion. The recipe book lay on her counter, and she opened it randomly to a page featuring Marissa's famous honey cake, which would be suitable for Malcolm. She studied the recipe, making a mental inventory of what she had and what she needed. She was low on eggs and completely out of the good vanilla extract Marissa always insisted on. Danielle gathered her purse and shopping list. The grocery store was only a 10-minute drive, located in a small commercial strip that stayed busy even after dark. The familiar routine of shopping would be calming, she told herself. The parking lot was well lit, the neon signs from the grocery store, gas station, and 24-hour donut shop creating an island of brightness in the desert night. Danielle parked near the entrance and was reaching for her reusable bags when movement at the gas station caught her eye. 3 men were exiting the convenience store. Her blood turned to ice when she recognized the brown fedora. She ducked down in her seat instinctively, then carefully peered over the dashboard. The men stood in a loose circle near a black sedan, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. They were too far away for her to hear clearly, but the night air carried fragments of their discussion. "Ledger has to be," one man gestured emphatically. "Careful with the search," the hat-wearing man responded. "We need to be quick." The third man kept glancing around nervously. Danielle's heart hammered against her ribs. A ledger? What kind of ledger would be hidden in Marissa's house? As she watched, another figure emerged from behind the gas station, a younger man wearing what looked like veterinary scrubs, the kind with cartoon animals printed on them. He jogged toward the group, carrying what appeared to be a small cooler. The men exchanged brief words before all 4 climbed into the sedan. Every rational part of Danielle's brain screamed at her to stay put, to call Detective Chen immediately and report what she'd seen. But as the black sedan pulled out of the gas station, a different impulse took hold. If that was Ethan, she needed to know. She needed to understand why he was sneaking around with strange men, why he'd tried to break into his own house, why he'd disappeared for 4 years while his pregnant wife's bones scattered in the desert. Before she could second-guess herself, Danielle started her car and followed. She tried to maintain a reasonable distance, keeping at least 2 car lengths between them as they navigated through town. The sedan moved purposefully but not recklessly, signaling all turns, obeying traffic lights. Whoever these men were, they didn't want to attract attention. As they reached the outskirts of Las Vegas, the traffic thinned considerably. The sedan turned onto Highway 160, heading west toward the desert. Danielle's unease grew with each mile. Where were they going? The road led to Pahrump eventually, but there was a lot of empty desert between here and there. With fewer cars on the road, maintaining cover became increasingly difficult. Danielle dropped back further, barely keeping the sedan's taillights in view. She grabbed her phone from the center console, fumbling to dial Detective Chen while keeping one eye on the road. "You're following them?" His voice was sharp with disbelief and anger. "Danielle, turn around right now. This is dangerous and unnecessary." "But what if it's really Ethan? What if it is? What's your plan? You're alone, untrained, and following potentially dangerous subjects into the desert at night. Turn around. Now we'll handle this properly." Danielle glanced at the dark road ahead. The detective was right, of course. She was being foolish, driven by emotion rather than logic. The sedan's lights were barely visible now, just red dots in the darkness. "Okay," she said finally. "You're right, I'm turning around." She slowed, looking for a safe place to make a U-turn on the narrow highway. The shoulder was soft sand that could easily trap her car's wheels. Finally, she spotted a wider section of pavement, probably an old construction pullout. Danielle had just completed her turn, headlights now pointing back toward the city lights in the distance, when she noticed headlights in her rearview mirror. The black sedan had also turned around and was approaching fast. "Oh, God," she breathed, dropping her phone as she pressed the accelerator. "Oh, God, they saw me." Her Honda Civic was no match for whatever engine powered the sedan. Within moments, it had caught up, riding her bumper aggressively. Danielle pushed her car harder, the speedometer climbing past 70, then 80. The sedan kept pace easily. Then it surged forward, pulling alongside her. Danielle caught a glimpse of the passenger, definitely the man in the fedora, gesturing for her to pull over. She ignored him, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. The sedan suddenly swerved into her lane, forcing her toward the shoulder. Danielle had two choices: hit them or hit the sand. She chose the sand, pumping her brakes as her tires left the pavement. The car fishtailed wildly before coming to a stop in a cloud of dust. Before she could throw the car in reverse, the sedan had stopped behind her, blocking any escape. Danielle frantically hit the door locks, her phone somewhere on the floor, probably under the seat. She watched in terror as the man in the fedora climbed out, retrieving something from the sedan's trunk. A tire iron. "Please," she said uselessly as he approached her driver's side window. "Please don't." The safety glass exploded inward in a shower of tiny cubes. Hands reached through, unlocking the door, dragging her out despite her struggles. In the dome light of her car, she finally got a clear look at the man's face. It wasn't Ethan. The relief was short-lived as rough hands zip-tied her wrists and stuffed a gag in her mouth. Another man was going through her car, gathering her purse, her phone, anything that might identify her. They bundled her into the sedan's back seat, one man sitting on either side of her. One of them was the man in scrub. Through the rear window, she watched as another man got into her Honda. The sedan's interior reeked of stale cigarettes and something medicinal that made Danielle's stomach turn. She thrashed against her restraints, trying to loosen the zip ties cutting into her wrists. But the man beside her, Max, she'd heard them call him, simply pressed a meaty hand down on her shoulder. "Save your energy," he advised with mock concern. "You're gonna need it." The driver, still wearing Ethan's fedora, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "I told you boys it was her from the news this morning. I never forget a face. Saw her from the window inside the house watching us. Luckily, her car's window film was cheap. Could see right through it." They'd blindfolded her shortly after leaving the highway. The journey seemed endless, probably at least an hour of driving deeper into the desert night. When the car finally stopped, she heard the crunch of footsteps on sand, the distant howl of coyotes. The door opened and hands pulled her out roughly. The blindfold came off, but the gag remained firmly in place. Danielle blinked in the darkness, her eyes adjusting to reveal a large warehouse structure that seemed to materialize from the desert itself. The building looked abandoned from the outside, with dim lights barely visible through grimy windows. The moment they crossed the threshold, her assumption proved correct. The interior blazed with fluorescent lighting, revealing a space that was anything but abandoned. The windows, she realized, had been treated with some kind of film to prevent light from escaping, making the building appear dark and deserted to anyone passing by. The man in the fedora removed his hat, running a hand through greasy hair, and Danielle got her first clear look at him. Definitely not Ethan. This man was shorter, stockier, with acne scars covering his cheeks and cold brown eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. "Welcome to our little operation," he said with a smile that made her skin crawl. "I'm Rico. You already met Max, and that's Chen over there." They marched her down a corridor lined with doors, some open to reveal rooms containing hospital beds. Her mind reeled as she tried to process what she was seeing. In one room, she glimpsed figures lying motionless on beds, IV lines snaking from their arms. In another, someone in scrubs was checking monitors. They brought her to a room containing several hospital beds, each equipped with restraint straps and monitoring equipment. The medical setup would have been reassuring in an actual hospital. Here, it filled her with dread. They forced her onto one of the beds, and Max efficiently transferred her restraints from the zip ties to the bed's built-in straps, securing her wrists to the side rails. Only then did Rico remove the gag. Danielle immediately screamed for help, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. Rico backhanded her casually, the blow snapping her head to the side. Do that again, and you'll never see another day. Clear?" Danielle tasted blood where her teeth had cut her cheek. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Good girl." Rico turned to Max. "Any word from Chet? Did he take care of her car?" "Should be dumped by now," Max replied. "He knows the drill." Danielle found her voice, though it came out as a whisper. "That hat? Where did you get it?" Max laughed, a harsh sound. "She knows the hat, Rico." Rico's smile widened. "Don't worry about it. More important things to focus on now." He turned to Max. "Go get our surgeon. This worked out even better than what we planned." As Max left, Rico and another man in scrubs began wheeling Danielle's bed down another corridor. The walls here were older, the paint peeling, the fluorescent lights flickering intermittently. They pushed through double doors into what was clearly meant to be an operating room, though it looked like something from a horror movie rather than a medical facility. The surgical equipment appeared functional but old. The overhead lights were harsh but uneven, creating pools of shadow in the corners. There were no windows, no connection to the outside world. They transferred her to the operating table, her protests and struggles useless against their practiced efficiency. "Shut her up," Rico ordered, "but not too heavy. We need her conscious." One of the medical staff, though Danielle suspected their credentials were questionable at best, produced a syringe. She tried to twist away, but firm hands held her still as the needle pierced her arm. Within minutes, a strange lethargy spread through her limbs. She remained fully conscious, her mind sharp with terror, but her body felt heavy, exhausted, as if she'd just run a marathon. The drug didn't dull the fear. If anything, being aware but unable to fight made it worse. The doors banged open. 2 guards dragged in a figure in filthy clothes, shoving him forward roughly. Danielle's heart stopped when she recognized the man's profile, the familiar way he held himself despite his obvious malnourishment. Ethan. He was alive. Thinner, his face gaunt and marked with healing bruises, his surgical hands trembling slightly, but alive. Rico's men surrounded him, forcing him into surgical scrubs with practiced efficiency. "Wash up, Doc. You know the drill." Ethan moved mechanically to the scrub sink, his movements those of a man who'd performed this ritual countless times. But when he turned toward the operating table and saw who lay there, his face went white. "Danny!" The word came out strangled. Danielle tried to speak, but the drug made everything difficult. "Please," she managed, her voice weak. "Ethan, it's me. Please, no, whatever they want you to do." Ethan's face transformed from shock to fury. He whirled on Rico. "Absolutely not. I'm not doing this. I don't care how much you beat me. I'm done working for you. I am not operating on my sister-in-law." "Your sister-in-law?" Rico feigned surprise. "No wonder I saw her at your house." Ethan's voice rose. "My house?" Rico's laughter was cold. "Funny story, actually. We just wanted to grab your ledger and insurance papers from your house. Need some leverage to get you back in line. But then this one was there, watching us from inside. And when we left, the stupid woman followed us, so we just took advantage of the opportunity. She makes much better leverage than some old paperwork, don't you think?" Danielle's drug-addled mind struggled to process this. Ledger? Insurance papers? What had Ethan been involved in? "The boss is getting impatient, Doc," Rico continued, his jovial tone vanishing. "Dominic wants you back on the job. You've been refusing for weeks now, and that's bad for business. So here's the deal. You start operating again, show us that loyalty we need, or little Danny here becomes our next donor. Your choice." "You bastard!" Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "You absolute—" "Tick-tock, Doc. What's it gonna be?" Danielle watched Ethan's internal struggle play across his face. 4 years of questions crashed down on her. Where had he been? What was this place? What had happened to Marissa? Finally, Ethan's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Fine, but she doesn't get touched. That's the deal." "Lucky you," Rico said to Danielle with false cheer. Such a soft-hearted brother-in-law. Family looking out for family. How touching. The doors opened again. The man in veterinary scrubs from the gas station wheeled in a stretcher. The figure strapped to it was young, female, unconscious. Another victim. "Move her," Rico ordered, gesturing at Danielle. They transferred her to a wheelchair, positioning her in the corner where she could see everything but do nothing. She caught Ethan's eye for just a moment, saw the anguish there, the silent apology. Despite the drug's effects, she remained alert enough to understand what she was witnessing. Whatever this operation was, Ethan had been forced to be part of it. And now she was trapped here too. "All right, Doc," Rico said, clapping his hands. "Time to earn your keep, and while you're at it, you're going to teach our new recruit here." He gestured to the man in veterinary scrubs. "Meet Dr. Paulson. Well, he's a doctor for animals, but we figure the basics are the same, right?" "You can't be serious," Ethan protested. "Human surgery isn't performed by veterinarians." "Then you better be a good teacher," Rico interrupted, "because Dr. Paulson here is your new assistant. Train him up nice. Refuse, and—" He glanced meaningfully at Danielle. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, then moved to the operating table with the reluctant determination of a man with no choices left. The veterinarian took position across from him, eager and nervous in equal measure. Just watch for now," Ethan said quietly. He began preparing the anesthesia, his hands steadier now that he'd fallen into familiar routine. "This is a kidney extraction. The patient is—" A large man entered the room, muscle, clearly, all bulk, and no subtlety. He grabbed Danielle's arm, hauling her up from the wheelchair. The drug made her legs unsteady, and she would have fallen if not for his grip. "Where are you taking her?" Ethan demanded, pausing in his preparations. "That's not your business," Rico said smoothly. "But rest assured, Doc, we'll keep her alive. For your sake, long as you keep being useful, she stays breathing. That's the deal." The muscular man's grip on Danielle's arm was like a vice as he dragged her through the warehouse corridors. Her legs, still weak from whatever drug they'd injected, barely kept pace. He stopped at a heavy metal door, produced a key, and shoved her inside. The room was stark. Concrete walls, a single bed with a thin mattress, a bucket in the corner, and nothing else. A bare bulb provided harsh lighting. It looked exactly like what it was, a prison cell. "Won't be long," the man said with a leering grin that made her skin crawl. "Just gotta get some supplies. Boss likes the new ones broken and proper." The door slammed shut, the lock clicking into place with finality. Danielle heard his heavy footsteps receding down the corridor. Alone, she took stock of her situation. The drug was wearing off slowly, sensation returning to her limbs. She tested her coordination by walking the perimeter of the small room, steadier with each step. The bed drew her attention. Something about it seemed off. As she sat on the edge, testing its stability, her hand brushed against something under the pillow. Her fingers found a pen, a simple ballpoint, but hidden deliberately. Curious now, she ran her hands along the mattress edge and felt paper between the mattress and the rusty bed frame. She pulled out several folded sheets, her heart stopping when she recognized Ethan's handwriting. The first page was their wedding vows. She remembered that day, how Ethan's voice had cracked with emotion as he'd read these words to Marissa. "I promise to love you through every surgery that runs late, every cake that doesn't rise quite right, every moment of joy and sorrow that life brings our way." The other pages were letters, all addressed to Marissa. The click of the lock made her jump. Danielle quickly stuffed the papers and pen into her jeans, pulling her shirt down to cover the bulge. The muscular man entered, and her blood turned to ice at what he carried: leather straps, handcuffs, a riding crop, items that had only one purpose in a place like this. "Time for your breaking session," he announced, setting the items on the floor with deliberate care. "Everyone here goes through it one way or another, but you're a pretty one, so this is special just for you." "No." Danielle backed against the wall. "You don't have to do this." "Sure I do. It's part of the job. The fun part." He advanced slowly, savoring her fear. "Now, you can make this easy or hard. Either way, it's happening." Danielle's mind raced. The pen pressed against her hip through the denim. One chance. She'd have to let him get close. "Please," she said, letting her voice break, playing up the fear that was already genuine. "I won't cause trouble. I promise." "That's what they all say." He reached for her, and Danielle forced herself not to recoil as his hands gripped her shoulders. "But I've got my orders." She spat in his face. His expression shifted from amusement to rage in an instant. The backhand came hard and fast, sending her sprawling onto the concrete floor. Stars exploded across her vision. "You little bitch!" He loomed over her. "Now you're really gonna get it." As he dropped to his knees, reaching for the straps, Danielle's hand found the pen. He was leaning over her, his face inches from hers, breath reeking of cigarettes and cheap whiskey. His weight pressed down, trapping her. Now or never. Her hand came up in one swift motion, driving the pen deep into his left eye. The man's scream was inhuman, his hands flying to his face as he rolled away from her. Blood poured between his fingers. Danielle scrambled backward, her own scream caught in her throat. But her eyes locked onto the gun holstered at his hip. As he writhed on the floor, she lunged for it, her fingers closing around the grip just as his hand shot out to grab her ankle. "I'll kill you!" he roared, his remaining eye wild with pain and fury. Despite his injury, his strength was terrifying as he started pulling her toward him. Danielle twisted, bringing the gun around. "Let go!" He didn't. His fingers dug deeper, and she could see him reaching for something. A knife in his boot. The gunshot was deafening in the small room. The man's scream pitched even higher as the bullet tore through his thigh. His grip loosened, and Danielle kicked free, scrambling to her feet. She stood over him, gun shaking in her hands, expecting guards to come running. But no one came. The room was soundproofed, she realized, designed to muffle screams. The door was locked. Danielle aimed at the lock mechanism and fired twice. The metal sparked and twisted, and when she yanked the handle, the door swung open. The corridor beyond was empty. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly green glow. She had no idea which way to go, but staying put meant death. She chose left and ran. Her bare feet slapped against cold concrete as she navigated the maze of corridors. She needed to find an office, a phone, some way to contact the outside world. Her cell phone was gone, probably destroyed with her car. Voices ahead made her duck into an alcove. Two men in scrubs walked past, discussing something about tomorrow's shipment. She waited until their footsteps faded before continuing. A stairwell appeared on her right. Up or down? She chose up, hoping to find administrative offices rather than more horror. She'd barely made it to the next landing when strong arms wrapped around her from behind, a hand clamping over her mouth before she could scream. Her finger found the trigger, but the man's urgent whisper stopped her. "Don't shoot! I'm a friend! I'm here to help! Ethan sent me!" Danielle struggled, not believing. "Please," the man continued. "My name is Tom. Ethan saved my life. We've been planning to escape, to shut this place down. I saw what happened on the security cameras. You in the surgery room. We need to move now." He slowly removed his hand from her mouth. Danielle spun to face him, gun raised. The man, Tom, was in his 40s, thin and haggard. He lifted his shirt to reveal a massive surgical scar across his abdomen, still pink and healing. 7 days ago, I was supposed to die, he said quickly. Botched surgery by one of their butchers. Lost too much blood, organs failing. But Ethan intervened. Operated on me again, off the books, without Dominic's permission. Fixed what the other guy destroyed. I owe him my life. How do I know you're telling the truth? You don't. But in about 2 minutes, they're going to find that guard you shot. Then this whole place goes on lockdown and we're both dead. So you can either trust me or try to find your own way out. Danielle hesitated, then lowered the gun slightly. Where's Ethan now? Still in surgery. He can't leave. But he told me if I ever got the chance to run, I should take it. And now you're here. Our chance. Tom glanced nervously down the stairwell. My truck is in the motor pool, but we need to move now. Against her better judgment, Danielle nodded. Tom led the way, moving with purpose through corridors he clearly knew well. They encountered a few people, but Tom's presence seemed to grant them passage, just another worker escorting someone somewhere. The motor pool was a garage area filled with various vehicles. Tom's truck, an old Ford F-150, sat near the exit. He grabbed a baseball cap and sunglasses from the cab, handing them to Danielle along with a hair tie. Put these on. Try to look like you belong. She tucked her hair up under the cap, slipped on the sunglasses despite the night hour. Tom started the engine, and she held her breath as he drove toward the security checkpoint at the exit. The guard barely glanced at them, just waved them through. They were out. Tom drove fast but not recklessly, putting miles between them and the warehouse. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, stars brilliant in the clear night sky. Danielle had no idea where they were. There's a gas station about 30 miles from here, Tom said. We can call police from there. What is that place? Danielle asked, her voice hoarse. What have they been doing? Organ harvesting, Tom replied grimly. Dominic Torino runs the whole operation. They grab people, homeless, addicts, people who won't be missed. Keep them alive as long as possible, taking organs as buyers need them. Kidneys, liver lobes, corneas, even skin sometimes. Danielle felt sick. And Ethan. They've had him for 4 years, forced him to do the surgeries. He tried to refuse recently. That's why they were looking for leverage at his house. That ledger they mentioned? It's got all the transactions, all the buyers, evidence that could bring down the whole network. Where's this Dominic? Separate building on the same complex. He rarely goes to the warehouse itself, leaves the dirty work to Rico and his crew. But he's the spider at the center of the web. The gas station finally appeared, a beacon of normalcy in the desert night. Tom parked away from the bright lights, and they hurried to the payphone. Danielle's fingers shook as she dialed 911. My name is Danielle Caldwell. I've been kidnapped and held at a warehouse where they're harvesting organs from victims. Multiple people are being held against their will. We need help immediately. The dispatcher's tone shifted to urgent professionalism. Tom took the phone, providing specific directions. North Las Vegas Industrial Zone, Building 47B off Highway 604, large warehouse complex with a separate administrative building, at least 20 armed guards, unknown number of victims. Can you also contact Detective Raymond Chen? Danielle added. This is connected to the Marissa Voss disappearance case. They were instructed to stay at the gas station and wait for police. Tom moved his truck to a spot where they could watch the road while remaining partially hidden. Not everyone there is evil, Tom said quietly as they waited. Most are trapped by debt, by fear, by threats to their families. But Rico and his core group, they're true believers. They enjoy the power. How many victims? At any given time? Maybe 15, 20. Some don't last long. Others, he trailed off. Within 20 minutes, the desert highway filled with vehicles running dark, no lights, no sirens. SWAT vans, patrol cars, ambulances staged further back. The response was massive and coordinated. A patrol car peeled off toward the gas station. 2 officers approached carefully, confirming their identities before escorting them to a mobile command unit that had been set up down the road. The tactical commander, a serious woman named Captain Torres, debriefed them quickly. Danielle emphasized that Ethan was a victim, forced to participate under threat of death. Tom provided detailed layouts of the buildings, guard positions, the location of the victim-holding areas. "We'll get them out," Captain Torres assured them. "Both the victims and your brother-in-law, but I need you both to stay here where it's safe." They were transferred to a patrol car with a good view of the road leading to the warehouse complex. Danielle clutched the gun she'd taken. The officers had let her keep it as evidence after confirming it wasn't loaded. All they could do now was wait and pray that the nightmare that had begun 4 years ago in Red Rock Canyon would finally end tonight. From inside the patrol car, Danielle watched the tactical teams move into position around the warehouse complex. The operation unfolded with military precision, officers in black tactical gear advancing in coordinated formations, using hand signals to communicate in the darkness. The first gunshots made her flinch. Tom, sitting beside her, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "They know what they're doing," he said quietly. But the gunfire intensified, echoing across the desert. Muzzle flashes lit up windows of the warehouse like deadly fireworks. She could hear shouted commands, the crash of breaching charges, the sharp crack of flashbang grenades. The battle wasn't quick. For nearly 40 minutes, the sounds of combat continued, periods of intense firefight followed by tense silence, then erupting again from a different part of the complex. Danielle's knuckles were white from gripping the door handle, every instinct screaming at her to run to the warehouse, to find Ethan. Finally, the gunfire ceased. Radio chatter increased, and she saw officers emerging from the building. They moved differently now, no longer the coiled readiness of combat, but the methodical process of securing a crime scene. Then came the parade of arrested suspects. Officers marched them out in a long line, hands cuffed behind their backs. Danielle recognized Rico immediately, his fedora gone, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Behind him came Max, then the veterinarian in his ridiculous scrubs, looking terrified. Chet, who must have been the one who disposed of her car, stumbled out with a pronounced limp. "That's at least 20, Tom counted, maybe 25. But it was the victims that made Danielle's heart break. Medical teams began bringing them out on gurneys and in wheelchairs. Some walked on their own, supported by paramedics, blinking in confusion at their sudden freedom. Others lay motionless on stretchers, IVs still attached, their conditions unknown. The wail of additional ambulances filled the air as more medical units arrived to handle the volume of victims. The parking area transformed into a makeshift triage center, paramedics sorting patients by severity of condition. "Where's Dominic?" Tom said suddenly, scanning the arrested men being loaded into police vans. "I don't see him." Danielle searched too, but the crime boss was nowhere among the captured. She saw officers conferring urgently, some heading back toward the administrative building Tom had mentioned. Then she spotted a familiar figure emerging from the warehouse, Ethan walking slowly, flanked by 2 officers. Even from a distance she could see how thin he'd become, how carefully he moved. A paramedic intercepted him, guiding him toward one of the ambulances. "I need to go to him," Danielle said, reaching for the door handle. The officer in the front seat turned. "Ma'am, please wait until—" "That's my brother-in-law. He's been missing for 4 years. Please." The officer radioed for permission, then nodded. "Stay close to the vehicles. This scene isn't fully secure yet." Danielle scrambled out of the patrol car, Tom following. She weaved between emergency vehicles, her eyes locked on Ethan. He was sitting on the back bumper of an ambulance now, a paramedic checking his vitals. "Ethan!" He looked up at her voice, and the expression that crossed his face nearly broke her. Grief, shame, relief, and anguish all warred for dominance. He tried to stand but swayed, the paramedic steadying him. They were 10 feet apart when movement in Danielle's peripheral vision made her turn. A figure was approaching from the direction of the administrative building, a man in an expensive suit, carrying guns in both hands. Without being told, she knew this was Dominic Torino. He moved with the desperation of a cornered animal, firing wildly into the air, then toward the cluster of police vehicles. Officers dove for cover, shouting warnings. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Ethan's face contorted with rage, 4 years of torture and guilt crystallizing into pure fury. He shoved past the paramedic and charged from Dominic's blindside, tackling him with the full force of his body. They crashed to the ground, wrestling for control of the weapons. Ethan's medical training had taught him anatomy, but Dominic's strength came from desperation. They rolled across the asphalt, each fighting for leverage. Ethan managed to grab one pistol, sending it skittering across the pavement. His knee found Dominic's wrist, forcing him to drop the other weapon. In seconds, Ethan had reversed their positions, snatching up one of the guns and pressing it to Dominic's temple. "You killed her!" Ethan's voice was raw, primal. "You killed my wife and my baby, shot her in the head like she was nothing?" Dominic, pinned beneath him, managed a bloody smile. "Go ahead, Doc. Pull the trigger." Ethan's hand shook. The gun wavered. Around them, officers had formed a circle, weapons drawn but holding fire. "She was pregnant," Ethan said, tears streaming down his face. 8 months pregnant. We'd tried for 6 years to have a baby, and you... "Do it," Dominic taunted. "You want to. I can see it in your eyes." For a long moment, Danielle thought Ethan would fire. His finger tightened on the trigger, his whole body trembling with the need for vengeance. Then his shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of him all at once. "Number, I've had enough death because of you. You don't get to make me a killer, too." Officers swarmed in, pulling Ethan away and restraining Dominic. They cuffed the crime boss roughly, hauling him to his feet. Even defeated, Dominic's eyes held a cold arrogance as they dragged him to join his arrested associates. Danielle rushed to Ethan as he collapsed to his knees on the asphalt. "That was incredibly stupid," she said, wrapping her arms around him. "And incredibly brave. I couldn't let him win again. Couldn't let him hurt anyone else." He was shaking now, adrenaline giving way to exhaustion. A paramedic approached, gently but firmly guiding them back to the ambulance. As the medic examined Ethan more thoroughly, cataloging old bruises and healing cuts, the extent of his ordeal became clear. Marks from repeated beatings covered his torso. His ribs showed signs of past breaks that had healed poorly. "This is from refusing to operate," Ethan explained weakly. "The past few weeks, when I wouldn't do the surgeries anymore, they tried to persuade me." A familiar voice made them both look up. Detective Chen had arrived, looking haggard but relieved. He conferred briefly with the scene commander before approaching them. "Danielle, Mr. Voss." He pulled out a notebook. "I know you're both exhausted, but I need to understand what happened here. Can you tell me everything?" Ethan closed his eyes, gathering strength. When he opened them, 4 years of hidden truth spilled out. "I had a gambling problem," he began, his voice hollow. "Started small, poker games with other doctors, some sports betting, but it spiraled. By 2018, I owed $300,000 to what I thought were just loan sharks. I didn't know about all this." He gestured weakly at the warehouse. "That day, October 14th, Marissa wanted to go hiking. I thought it would be nice, one last normal day before I had to tell her about the debt. We posted that photo on Facebook, geotagged at Red Rock Canyon. Within an hour, Dominic's men found us on the trail." His voice broke. Danielle squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. "They demanded payment. When I couldn't pay, they threatened Marissa, threatened our baby. Marissa. She didn't know about any of it. She panicked, tried to call 911. They forced us into a van, and—" He couldn't continue for a moment. "Dominic shot her, point blank, said it was a lesson about what happens when people don't cooperate." Detective Chen wrote steadily, his expression professionally neutral despite the horror of what he was hearing. "They kept me alive because of the debt. said I could work it off as their surgeon. They dumped Marissa's body in the deep desert. I heard them talking about a place where coyotes were active, where the remains would scatter quickly. Then they brought me here." "And you've been here ever since? 4 years?" Ethan nodded. "At first I told myself I deserved it. My addiction, my debt caused Marissa's death. I was as guilty as them. So I did what they wanted, operated on their victims, harvested organs for buyers, became the monster they needed." He looked at Danielle, eyes pleading for understanding. "But a few weeks ago, on our wedding anniversary, I dreamed about her. She told me she was waiting for me, but I had to be a good man first, had to stop the killing. That's when I started refusing their orders." "That's why they were looking for leverage at your house," Detective Chen said. "The ledger they mentioned?" "Financial records, lists of buyers, transactions. I kept copies hidden, thinking maybe someday, but when I stopped cooperating, they got desperate." The detective turned to Danielle. "And you got caught in the middle." "If I hadn't followed them," she started. "You saved lives tonight," Tom interrupted, approaching with an officer. "If you hadn't escaped and called for help, who knows how many more victims there would have been." More statements were taken, details recorded. The crime scene would take days to fully process, but the immediate threat was over. As they prepared to leave for the police station for formal statements, Danielle found herself sitting beside Ethan in the back of a patrol car. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered. "For everything. For Marissa, for the baby, for disappearing, for all the pain I caused you." "Marissa came to you in a dream and offered forgiveness," Danielle said softly. "If she can do that after what happened, then I can try too. But Ethan, the gambling has to stop. Forever." It did stop, months before that day actually, but the debt and interest kept growing. He stared out the window at the desert darkness. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, starting with giving Marissa and our baby a proper burial." Danielle nodded, her own tears falling freely now. Through the patrol car's rear window, she watched Tom climbing into another police vehicle, their eyes meeting briefly. She mouthed, "Thank you," and he nodded, understanding. As the patrol car pulled away from the warehouse, leaving behind the flashing lights and controlled chaos of the crime scene, Danielle and Ethan sat in shared grief and tentative hope. The sunrise was still hours away, but for the first time in 4 years, they were moving towards something other than darkness. The police station awaited, with hours of questions and paperwork and decisions about the future. But for now, in the back of this patrol car cutting through the desert night, 2 broken people who had lost so much held on to the possibility that healing, however difficult and distant, might finally begin.